Drive safe. Mom, we saved you a seat at the Christmas table. That message from Miles had arrived 3 days earlier, just as I'd finished dusting off the family cookie cutters. I read it twice, smiled like always, and typed back, "Can't wait. I'll bring the cookies and the cranberry jam you like." By Christmas morning, my kitchen smelled of cinnamon, clove, and vanilla. I packed everything with care, each cookie layered between wax paper, each gift wrapped in simple red paper with twine bows. I'd even written personalized notes this year, just a small line or two about what I loved most about each grandchild. The drive from Albuquerque to Mesa took me 6 hours. I stopped only twice, once for coffee and once to stretch my legs. The sun was low when I reached their street. I remember thinking how warm the lights looked from a distance, gold flickering through the windows like the promise of welcome. I parked across from the house. Their yard was strung with lights, a snowman glowing beside the walkway. I could hear laughter inside, a burst of music. My heart swelled. I gathered the gifts, the cookies, the bottle of apple cider I'd chilled overnight. I walked to the front porch, knocked, waited. Nothing. I rang the bell. The music didn't pause. The laughter didn't slow. I waited a little longer before trying the handle. Locked. I stepped back. Checked the time, 4:03. The dinner invite said 4. Maybe they were in the kitchen. Distracted. I tried again. Knocked harder. Called Miles. No answer. I stepped down. Settled on the porch's cold edge. The bag of cookies beside me. Inside, someone was pouring wine. A child squealed with delight. Through the curtain's edge, I saw them raise their glasses, and that's when I realized I was watching Christmas happen from the outside. The wind picked up just enough to sting my face, and I pulled my coat tighter. The plastic handle of the gift bag dug into my fingers, but I didn't let go. I tried Miles again. Voicemail. I sent a text, "I'm here. Honey." At the door. No reply. I stood for another minute, then sat down slowly on the edge of the porch step, careful not to crush the cookies. My knees ached from the drive. My heart ached for a reason I couldn't yet name. Inside, shadows moved. Silverware clinked. Someone laughed that full-throated laugh Ruth had inherited from her father. The curtains were drawn just enough for me to catch the flicker of a chandelier and a glimpse of a red table runner I'd sewn years ago. I pulled out my phone. Still nothing from Miles. I opened Instagram without thinking. It took less than 5 seconds to find it. A new post from Ruth Full Hearts. Full house. Christmas magic. 8 people in the photo. The table set, lit with candles. Miles and his wife at the head. Ruth and her partner beside them, Ivy with her twin girls, the grandchildren grinning, the roast in the center, the wine glasses raised. 8 chairs. I counted them once, then again. No empty space, no folding chair in the corner, no plate left untouched. I stared at the screen long enough for my hands to go numb. I let them. The cider in my tote was still cold. I had dressed for warmth, not understanding it wouldn't be needed. A notification pinged a message from a neighbor's Christmas group thread, not from them. I stood up slowly. My legs were stiff, but my mind had cleared. I walked back to my car without looking back. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but it was warm. That felt like enough. I checked in with a soft Merry Christmas to the clerk, who barely looked up from his phone. Room 107, ground floor, 2 vending machines humming down the hall. I didn't bother to unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my notebook, the one I used for grocery lists and reminders to refill prescriptions. That night, it became something else. I wrote one name at the top, Miles. Underneath mortgage deposit, $35,000, down payment on his first house. He said I could stay there anytime. I moved to the next name, Ruth. Monthly transfers, $600 since 2017. daycare help, birthday parties, emergency vet bill for the dog. I totaled it roughly in my head. Almost 40,000. I hadn't kept receipts. I just remembered. Ivy. ER bill for the twins when they got RSV. 2,000. No insurance. Used car loan co-signed. She missed 3 payments. Groceries every other month. Usually 400 or 500 each time. I turned the page. Christmas 2021. 800 on gifts. Thanksgiving. Catered dinner. 500. Ruth said she was too tired to cook. Miles didn't offer. I underlined the last entry, not out of anger, just to see it clearly. I flipped back and began doing the math. 184,000. Give or take. Most of it since retirement. I never kept much for myself. I used to think that meant I was generous. Tonight, it just felt like I'd been quietly emptied out. I thought about the dinner table. 8 seats, all filled. Not one person had noticed I was missing. I closed the notebook and reached into the bag beside me. I unwrapped one of the sugar cookies I'd made that morning, Ruth's favorite, lemon zest and almond. It crumbled too easily, just like me. I brushed the crumbs off the bedspread and stared at the ceiling until morning. After sunrise, I sat on the edge of the motel bathtub, brushing my teeth in silence. The mirror was warped, but it showed enough. I looked tired, but not surprised. My reflection took me back to a different kitchen, in a different kind of silence. Ruth was 13. Her brothers were already out the door for school, but she lingered behind, holding her backpack against her chest. "You're all I've got," she said quietly, eyes rimmed with sleep. I'd just packed her lunch, ham sandwich, apple slices, a cookie split in half to make it last. I kissed her forehead. "I know," I said, not knowing how heavy that sentence would grow over the years. After Daniel died, car accident, a Tuesday. No warning, I hadn't let myself fall apart. I walked to the library job every morning, cleaned houses on weekends, skipped lunch so the kids could have seconds at dinner. We went without cable, without name-brand clothes, without a working dryer some winters, but never without each other. I never asked for anything back. Not a thank you, not a Mother's Day card. I told myself the love was enough. Ruth used to write me poems. Ivy would bring me wildflowers from the side of the road. Miles once made a chore chart and called himself man of the house at 7. Back then, love wasn't expensive. It just existed, in small, soft ways. I looked into the mirror now, ran a hand over my cheeks, hollowed a little more than last year. I thought of all the meals I'd cooked, the beds I'd made, the overtime I'd worked so no one else had to feel the cold. And still, I was never enough. I turned off the bathroom light and reached for my purse. When I got back home, the poinsettias on my porch had wilted, but the house still smelled faintly of cinnamon and polish. I set the untouched bags of gifts on the kitchen table and stood for a moment, unsure if I should unpack them or pretend they'd never been filled. I made tea, sat in my usual chair, and turned on my phone. The screen lit up with 24 messages from the family group thread. Not one of them had come from Christmas Eve. All of them were from Christmas Day. Miles Hope. Everyone's having fun. Ruth's roast was amazing. Ivy. Next year, we need to plan earlier. I think Mom got confused on the date. Ruth well? She hasn't said anything. Maybe she changed her mind. No one had called. No one had asked where I was. They simply moved on, as if I were an optional guest. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Alcott, my next-door neighbor, stood with a container of squash soup and her usual kind eyes. "Just wanted to check in," she said. "Saw you came back late Christmas night." We sat for a few minutes while I pretended not to feel brittle. Then she reached into her purse and said quietly, "I debated showing you this, but I think you should know." It was a screenshot. A local Facebook group, Mom Support Circle, over 50. Ruth's name at the top. My mom is driving me nuts. always inserting herself, needing rides, help with tech stuff, and then expecting to be included in every little thing. She's like our in-house nanny and bank. It's exhausting. Below that, dozens of comments, some laughing, some agreeing. My stomach went cold. The tea turned bitter in my mouth. I thanked Mrs. Alcott and saw her out. Then I sat down again, phone in hand, and drafted a message to the group thread I was outside your door for over an hour. I saw everything, but I didn't send it. I deleted it and opened my banking app instead. The next morning, I brewed coffee stronger than usual and sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bank statements I printed at the library. Page after page, line after line, names I knew too well. Miles, mortgage deposit, Christmas flights, soccer camp. Ruth, weekly transfers, daycare tuition, new tires. Ivy, ER copays, groceries, birthday parties, gas cards. I used a pen to underline each payment. The ink bled slightly into the paper, but I needed to see it. I totaled the columns twice. $182,612. That was nearly the entirety of what I'd earned since retiring. My pension, just under $2,000 a month, barely stretched far enough for my own utilities once I covered theirs. And they never noticed when the lights dimmed here. I thought about the sugar cookies still sitting in the freezer, the ones Ruth liked with cardamom and lemon zest. I'd once mailed a dozen to her office in a rush because she said her coworkers loved them. She never reimbursed the postage. I opened my banking app and clicked through each recurring payment. Delete, delete, delete. 800. For Ruth gone. 500 for Ivy gone. Car payment for Miles's second vehicle gone. I paused before removing the health insurance plan I'd added Ivy to last year, then clicked cancel anyway. For the first time in years, there was no money scheduled to leave my account. The silence in my house was not empty. It was full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. I closed the app and slid the statements into a folder. Then I picked up the phone not to send a message, but to make an appointment with my credit union. Miles answered the door with his usual half smile, the one he wore when he was unsure if he was in trouble. He stepped aside and gestured for me to come in, but I didn't move past the doorway. I just need 10 minutes, I said. He nodded, glanced over his shoulder. Katie's upstairs with the kids. You should say hi before you go. I didn't answer that. He shifted, hands in his pockets. So, I heard you were upset. I pulled a photo from my purse, printed, not digital, and held it up. 8 chairs, candles lit, wine glasses raised. No room for a ninth. I wasn't confused. Miles. I was outside. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked down at the photo. There was just a lot going on. He mumbled. I thought Ruth was handling the invites. You told me you saved me a seat, I said, quietly. But you didn't. You never meant to. He started to speak again, but I pulled the letter from my coat pocket and handed it to him. He looked down at the envelope, confused. I'm resigning, I said. From what? From being your emergency fund. Your quiet backup. Your afterthought. I won't fund a seat I was never meant to sit in. He didn't open the letter, just stood there. Stunned. I've canceled the transfers. All of them. If you need help, there are options, banks, advisors, credit cards. But not me. He swallowed hard. You're serious. For the first time in a very long time. Katie's footsteps echoed faintly from upstairs. Miles turned, maybe expecting me to soften. I didn't. I came here to tell you in person. I said, that's more than I was given. I stepped back from the door before he could say anything else. My car was still warm when I climbed in. I drove away with my palms steady on the wheel. They came the next evening, one after another, like it had been rehearsed. Ruth first, then Ivy, then Miles. No one called ahead. They didn't need to. They came like people who had just lost their keys to a house they forgot I owned. We sat in the living room. They didn't ask to. They just took their places like they always had, as if I were the one who owed an explanation. Ruth started, "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion." Ivy crossed her arms. "It was one dinner. One—" Miles didn't look at me. "You're making this about money." I let them talk. I didn't interrupt. Not when Ruth said she was just venting in the group. Not when Ivy rolled her eyes and called this a tantrum. Not even when Miles said, "I never asked you to give us anything." That's when I finally spoke. "No." I said, "You never asked. You just expected." And I gave, because I thought that's what love looked like. They fell quiet for the first time. I looked at each of them. "When was the last time any of you called me just to ask how I'm doing?" Ruth blinked. Ivy looked away. Miles finally met my eyes, but said nothing. "I was outside your house on Christmas Eve. I watched you laugh. I saw the table, 8 chairs." Ruth opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You forgot me before I ever canceled a single dollar," I said. All I did was stop pretending I didn't notice. They sat in silence, shifting like strangers in a room they no longer recognized. I stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen. I made myself tea while they stayed in the living room, unsure what to say now that the script had changed. Alina came alone the next afternoon. No text, no warning, just a soft knock and her familiar voice calling, "Grandma." She held a paper bag from the bakery on 6th Street and a small pot with a marigold inside. "Thought you might need something sweet," she said, "and something to keep alive." I stepped aside to let her in. Her hug was real, the kind that wrapped around both shoulders and didn't ask for anything in return. We sat at the table. She didn't bring up the family. She didn't ask why they were upset or what I'd done. She simply opened the bag and pulled out 2 cinnamon rolls. "Slightly warm. I saw your name was removed from the daycare payment system," she said gently. "Mom was yelling about it on the phone. But I just wanted to see how you are." I didn't answer right away. My throat was thick. Instead, I reached for the flower pot. "Want to help me plant this?" We went to the back porch, dug a shallow spot in the soil near the rosemary bush, and tucked the marigold in like it had always belonged there. Alina pressed her fingers into the dirt beside mine. "You deserve to live for yourself," she said softly, smoothing the soil. I looked at her, the same girl who used to leave scribbled notes on my fridge, who always insisted on carrying her own backpack even when it dragged the ground. "I think I'm learning how—" I whispered. We watered the flower together. No lecture, no guilt, just stillness. Later, she left with a promise to come back soon, no matter what her mother said. And when the door closed behind her, I realized I'd smiled for the first time in days. I signed up for a painting class at the community center on a quiet Wednesday morning. No one asked why I was there. No one needed a reason, just brushes, paper, and a room full of women rediscovering color. That afternoon, I went to a bookstore I used to pass but never entered. I picked 3 novels from the shelves, 1 mystery, 1 travel memoir, and 1 simply because the title made me smile. I paid in cash and didn't think twice. A week later, I drove to Santa Fe, alone. I booked a room with a balcony and ate dinner at a small cafe with no reservations, no conversation, no pressure. I sat with warm bread and wine and listened to my own breath. Back at the hotel, I opened my journal. For the first time in months, the page didn't feel heavy. I wasn't too much. I wrote. I was just giving to the wrong people. I underlined it once, then closed the cover. The next morning, I opened the curtains and let the sun land fully across my lap. The room held only my things, my peace, my name. The messages started again. First Ruth, then Ivy, then Miles. Ruthalina's tuition is due next week. Can you help just this once, Ivy? I'm behind on rent. It's been a rough month. Miles. The transmission failed. I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I read each one carefully, then opened a new message and wrote just once, I'm unavailable for financial support. I wish you all growth. I didn't sign it with love, but I meant no harm. I simply meant, I'm done. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen window. The orchid on the sill had begun to bloom, 3 delicate white petals curling toward the light. I watered it gently, wiped the leaves clean. Then I turned to the page I'd marked in my travel guide. Oregon, the coast, the tall trees and cool mornings. I made a list of what to pack. 2 books, my walking shoes, a scarf for wind, my new brush set. Outside, a bird landed on the fence and stayed. I didn't rush to capture the moment. I simply watched it, still and whole. 6 months later, I sat at a small patio table in Portland, sipping coffee and watching people drift past with their lives tucked under their arms, canvas bags, guitars, dogs on leashes. I ate a croissant warm from the oven, no one across from me, no one expecting anything, and I felt full. In my bag were postcards I'd written to myself from each stop on my trip. You didn't fold. You opened. You didn't disappear. You returned. You didn't get invited. You arrived anyway. Most days I walked along the river and painted nothing polished, nothing meant to impress, just light on water, color where it wasn't expected. I kept a copy of Mary Oliver's poems in my coat pocket. I read one each morning like a prayer, then tucked it away and lived accordingly. No one texted anymore asking for money. No one sent guilt-laced apologies. They had adjusted. So had I. The table I sat at wasn't saved for me. I built it. And now, every time I sit down, I know this seat, this peace, this breath, it was never theirs to offer. It was always mine to claim.